My name is Brandt. I'm a curator working in Copenhagen, but also other places. I have an office that I call Råderum, which means creating possibilities. And it's a mobile office that moves around and works site-specific in different spaces of the urban environment. We're sitting where we are right now is Factory of Art and Design, which is a spot in Copenhagen where we've been doing the Alternative Art Festival this year, curating it, Råderum. And we've been inviting here, there's like 52 different designers and artists, and that's why what you also hear, people are working here, space for a lot of artists and a lot of activities. For the last 7 years, we've been doing these urban recipes. The last for the art fair, Crosscuts, that was just taking place here at the factory. We were working with the artist Oscar and Martinka, and they were doing a new recipe for us that was called a strategy to minimize the error, of course, of consumption. So the recipe was a recipe where they were teaching people how to go and take waste behind the supermarkets and use that for creating food for themselves. And so they were inviting people around the factory. There's a lot of different people living here, and asking them to join them when doing dumpster diving, and afterwards creating food together, sharing food, and eating food together. So it's like an urban gastronomy made out of waste. For me, it's like a bit kind of urban acupuncture, where what you do, the strategy or the thing that you actually do, maybe is very small, but it can point out new ways of thinking our city, but also new ways of thinking of how can we be together. So something very small, like within acupuncture, where you place your finger one place, can actually sort of change how you feel in the whole body, meaning here society. And I think art is a possibility of thinking in new ways and free ways of recreating structures within society, reimagining and reshaping the future, actually. What I really like to work with when we work with the recipes is that, they take some kind of very, sometimes complex thoughts about how to recreate the city, but they do it in a very simple manner. We all understand what a recipe is. You have some ingredients, then you mix the ingredient in a certain way, and then you get an outcome. Let's say it could be a meal, but when you do it with artistically, it could be like a new playscape, as you see in the recipes, or it could be an urban picnic. What you discuss is actually a more sort of rhetorical matters. You create new ways of looking at the world and looking at yourself, and also what you can afterwards, when you're done with doing it once, people can take it over, which I find really important. So it's like co-creation more than the genius of an artist, but it's sharing what you have in mind, but also giving it out so that people can recreate and giving it out again. So I like to call it like it's a rhizome. I don't know if you know the plant structure of a rhizome, which is not hierarchical, but more working like this, like in all way, different sides, and it's like always putting new roots, and you don't really know where these roots are ending, which I enjoy. Because then when we work in urban space, it's also about ownership, and how do you actually give ownership to other people than yourself? How do you open up your processes within the aesthetic realm? How do you transfuse art into everyday life? And in that sense, the urban space and the mobility is a very important practice and a very important tool, because it's where everybody all the time are. Instead of maybe the institutions, museums, they're more close to themselves. You have to pay to get indoor, and already there you already talking to certain people. And I like to talk to more than these kind of segments that actually are going to museums. I think one very interesting movement is now, to go and collect. on one hand, the garbage, which is actually something which is going on a lot here in Copenhagen. Different communities working with distributing food, getting food from supermarkets that is sort of overdue, and they're doing structures within that, so creating new economies. That is really inspiring. A lot of things are going on. There's a lot of shops where you can actually buy these things. There's also a lot of people who collect and give to homeless, and all kind of networks within that. That's very inspiring, I think. And the other thing is, which is a bit different, but it reminds maybe a little bit, is this to go and find food in nature, but also in city nature. We call it in Danish, we call it sanke. I don't know, it probably has an English word that I don't really know, but to go out and find food in your close environment and eat it. I find that very inspiring. And there's a lot of restaurants here, both working with waste, but also working with this kind of collecting food in your close by and urban environment. I think we'll see a lot more of, these kind of city gardens and having apples and stuff in the city that people could pick and just eat instead of having to go and buy them in the supermarket. So that's how can we actually, I think what is really important that we look into in the future is how to create structures where it's not about growth, it's not about more consumption, but it's more about sustainable strategies. And these things are sustainable strategies to minimize actually some of the errors that we've devastated by right now. I think we'll see people, or at least part of groups that will take over more sort of what we've been trying to do with the recipe was like start a platform for people creating their own city, people taking over the city. And I think we'll see a lot of more social responsibility. What we experience within the Nordic countries is that less and less from our welfare structures are there. People have to take much more responsibility themselves. And that goes within all structures of life. And also, I think within the artistic practice, you'll see new ways of also from the makers society. I mean, where the makers are recreating things out of what's there instead of always demanding new stuff. So it's a rethinking of growth, I think, to create sustainable cities, to use what's there, use the spaces that we have, and maybe to think them in many layers, as gardens, as places to be together. Instead of just adding on with new things, then adding on with new kind of experiences that we do together.